Muy buenas tardes, noches, bienvenidos a todos a Rincón de Beltrán. Este es el segundo programa y bueno, como ya habéis visto, es un programa especial por las elecciones estadounidenses. Quizás no lo sepamos esta noche, quizás no lo sepamos mañana, debido a los problemas que hay con el voto postal, pero en unos días sabremos quién va a ser el próximo presidente de los Estados Unidos, si Donald Trump sigue en su puesto o si Joe Biden se alza vencedor en esta carrera por la Casa Blanca. Para hacerlo y para tratar de resolver mitos sobre una carrera que es tan importante para todos nosotros, puesto que al fin y al cabo las decisiones que se toman en Washington nos afectan a todos, pues trato de contactar con dos jóvenes del Partido Republicano y ahora mismo comenzaremos la entrevista y tendremos esta conversación para tratar de dar un poco de luz sobre qué ocurre y qué hace la juventud en la política americana. Antes de eso me gustaría daros dos anuncios. El primero de ellos, el acto que teníamos programado la entrevista con el militar del ejército español, y sabes quién eres, así que muchísimas gracias. No se puede realizar debido a que el Ministerio de Defensa no lo ha autorizado. Seguiremos trabajando, bueno, pues, para ver cómo podemos tocar el tema del ejército y que esta vez Defensa lo apruebe. Por otro lado, antes de empezar en sí, quiero presentar a mi amigo Ventura Antequera. Ventura es un joven de 20 años, ahora mismo estudia en la Universidad Rey Juan Carlos.
Exacto.
Y lo que hace destacable a Ventura es que él es muy activo políticamente hablando, tanto en España como en Estados Unidos. Ahora mismo forma parte de Prager U, un canal y un medio de comunicación que estoy seguro que muchísimos conocéis, por el programa Estudiantes, por Prager Force. Y debido a eso, él ha estado en Estados Unidos trabajando y ayudando al movimiento conservador ahí, y de ahí es donde conoció a nuestros invitados. Sin él este programa no sería posible, así que quiero darle muchísimas gracias. Así que bueno, gracias Ventura y tu turno.
Muchas gracias, Beltrán. Y bueno, muchas gracias también sobre todo a los dos, a Michael y a Kevin. Hoy, pues tal como ha mencionado Beltrán, vamos a tener el honor pues, de hablar de las elecciones de Estados Unidos con dos grandes representantes del Partido Republicano. Ellos dos pertenecen o han pertenecido, mejor dicho, a los College Republicans, que es así como la rama universitaria de los republicanos, y pues allí se conocieron ambos. Eh, el que veis ahí con el polo azul se llama Michael Carpenter. A él tuve el honor de conocerle cuando estuve trabajando allí en Estados Unidos en el verano de 2019. Y es una gran persona, un gran amigo y vamos, estoy encantado de haberlo conocido. Y Kevin, pues era una persona que no había conocido todavía, no había conocido personalmente y que gracias a Michael y a su hermano Matt tuve el honor de conocerle y con el que he podido hablar, y puedo decir que es un enamorado de la cultura española, de la política española, de España mismamente. Así que
Creo, perdón que interrumpa, que esa bandera de Valencia en el fondo lo muestras sin ningún problema.
exacto, allí detrás, la de Valencia. También tiene una bandera española muy bonita que el otro día nos la enseñó. Así que muchas gracias a ambos por participar con los dos.
Bueno, después de esta introducción ya empezamos con lo que es la entrevista en sí. Para los que lo entendéis en inglés, perfecto. Para los que os cuesta un pelín más, todo está subtitulado, así que no os preocupéis. So, let's start. To start from the basics, Kevin, one of the things that shocks most foreigners is the fact that in the previous elections, Hillary had 3 million, well, beat Trump by 3 million votes. However, he's the president, not her. This is due to the electoral college, the system you employed in the United States. How could you explain that to us, please? How does it
Yes,
work?
of course. It's a bit of a different system. It's in our constitution. Most countries don't do it the way we do. And it rarely happens that someone wins the popular vote, but not the electoral college. But it has happened, as you mentioned, in 2016. It happened. Essentially, each state has an assigned amount of votes for the electoral college. It's the combination of members of the House of Representatives with the number of senators for a state. Every state has 2 senators, and the minimum electoral votes for a state is 3. And then Washington, D.C., although it's not a state, they also have 3. So Virginia has 13, California has 55, Florida has 29, is different depending on representation in Congress. So what happens is it's almost a mini election within the state. So if Biden were to win Virginia, even if it was just by 500 votes, he gets all 13 electoral votes. That's how most states do it. So once, you might not win the popular vote, but if you win more states you're able to win the Electoral College and the presidency, which is what happened with Donald Trump in 2016.
Okay. Regarding this, because it has occurred 5 times in the history of the United States, the last 2 of them in 2000, in the Bush v. Gore, and obviously Hillary versus Trump in 2016, the Democrats has been affected by this system. So many of them are calling it undemocratic, which to some extent they do have a point in the sense that obviously there's a mismatch between obviously the electoral vote and the popular vote, and they are calling for its substitution. How do you think, Michael, what merits do you think this argument has, and how will you respond to it?
I think this is because a lot of the votes in the national popular vote are coming from large Democrat areas like New York and Los Angeles. The Electoral College is giving a voice to smaller states. It's like in Spain, this would be the same as if Madrid and Barcelona chose the leader of Spain every year. There are a lot of other smaller cities and towns other than Madrid and Barcelona. The Electoral College is like a balance between urban and rural living. Sometimes the Democrats will win, sometimes the Republicans will win. It depends on the candidate and if they can campaign to more people in the desired states rather than the people living in the big cities are choosing the leader every single year.
Okay, to this is obviously the importance of the state, as in whoever wins the state, wins the most number of states, gets the White House. Here is the idea of some states, for instance, you mentioned California, usually being a Democratic state, Texas being a Republican state, so blue and red states, and then the idea of the swing states. What are they? What's a swing state in the American political system?
So, Michael, do you want to answer this one? Or do you want me to?
You go ahead.
All right. So, swing state is a state that can either go Republican or Democrat. A lot of states are solidly Republican or solidly Democrat. California has not gone Republican in 20 years, probably since Reagan, at least 30 now. So that's a tradition. That's not really a swing state because they always go one way, while North Dakota or Montana is usually more Republican, a state like that. So it's a state that is a toss-up. Florida is one. It could go either way. Pennsylvania is usually one. Virginia used to be one, although we've gone Democrat in the last 4 elections or so. So we're slowly not becoming one. And Texas is becoming one, which is usually a Republican state. So they can shift, depends on population, but that's what they are.
Okay, because actually you mentioned Florida, and one of the things I always notice with Florida is the importance of the Hispanic vote on it. And obviously, this being a Spanish audience, they will find this important. According to the data I see, 7 out of 10 votes of Hispanics usually go to Democrats, whereas the last 3 go to Republicans. If we divide the Hispanics within nationalities, Mexicans are the most likely to vote Democrat, whereas Cubans and now Venezuelans, being the ones that are suffering the most under communism, tend to be strong supporters of the Republican. My question to you, Michael, being somebody involved in politics and that obviously a person that has confronted these situations, how can the Republicans swift this idea? How can they go and, okay, I don't say all Hispanics to vote for them, but to be more 50-50, how can they attract some of, for instance, those Mexican voters?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a problem that a lot of Republicans have been trying to tackle for the last several years. Donald Trump has actually been improving his popularity with Hispanics. We can see if that's enough, if he has done enough for the future election. But you're right, with Cubans, he has, I believe, over 70% favorability. And that's because these are people that are coming from countries that have very oppressive governments, and they're coming to the United States, and they can probably see some similarities between policy in the Democrat Party, and they do not want to have a repeat of what happened in their country happen to them in America. As for, you're right, for Mexicans or Puerto Ricans, Trump does not have as much support among them. So I think some things that Trump can do to gain support among Mexicans and Puerto Ricans is just explain his policy and start pushing for a specific policy targeting the Hispanic population to help lift them from maybe lower or middle class to upper middle to upper class, and start, working on immigration reform to make it maybe easier to come into the United States rather than only focusing on cutting out illegal immigration. Maybe we can focus to making it easier to immigrate to the United States.
Okay, but one of the things I see, and I see Kevin wanted to come in, is that some of Trump's proposals, at least from a European perspective, are quite outlandish to some extent. For instance, the idea of the wall, of the wall to separate the US and Mexico. Many point that proposals or rhetoric, with these ideas included, are the one is in partly responsible for alienating the Hispanic vote. My question is towards you, Kevin. Do you think that's the case? And so specifically, if that's the case, that's bad for the popularity of Republicans. And more broadly, with all these ideas that we've seen in Europe as so, again, outlandish, how do you view in the USA? Do you think that totally sensible or not?
Well, as far as I'm actually not a supporter of the wall and some of the more out there ideas. I don't believe it's a way you stop illegal immigration. Many are through tunnels, and many are, smuggled across different ways. So I actually see it as more of a political theater, not really an effective solution. And I think some of his remarks, I think that's to really cater to a certain base. And clearly it does not seem as outlandish to certain people here because he did win in 2016 anyway. I think that's kind of to drum it up. I think he knows that when he says certain things, he'll definitely get a lot of attention, and certain media groups and outlets will blow it up. But to your point earlier, I think in the long run, the Republicans, just the party in general, even after Trump, needs to focus on the Hispanic vote because that is a huge group. And we, as Republicans, I think Michael would agree, we have a very pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, and people who want to come here and make a better life for themselves also have that mentality. And I think we share a lot. So I think actually sometimes those comments might hurt Republican relationships with those groups. But yeah.
Okay. It's because related to this, I think that sometimes, at least in the American optic, you focus too much on the personalities. So obviously there's Trump, there's Biden, there's Hillary, there's whoever you want. But there are many people, there are parties, and there are many forces within those parties behind them. So leaving the candidates aside for a second, I would like to focus on the people. And you being young people, and this channel being designed for young people, I would like to ask, how can young people become involved in American politics? Do parties have some sort of youth wing, or, well, please, if both of you could explain, I will be grateful.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure how it works in many European governments, but in the United States, with our political parties, we don't have a specific youth wing. But especially with the Republican Party, we have a lot of youth organizations that have been established throughout the years. Some of them include Turning Point USA, College Republicans, Young Americans for Freedom, and they have been mostly focusing on spreading conservative ideals to the youth, because many young people, they think it's cool to be liberal. They think it's cool to be left wing. So they don't, maybe they don't realize that, oh, maybe like I share a lot of ideas with the conservatives or the Republicans. So these organizations are trying to spread enthusiasm and information to the youth. Also, for young people to get involved, we can volunteer with any of our local election offices, and any local campaign will always take volunteers. I know, like me, myself, and Kevin have gone around door knocking, like going up to people's houses, knocking on their doors, and said, like, "Hey, like, do you have a minute to talk about Donald Trump?" And they say yes, then we can talk to them and maybe we can pull some voters that way. But I think that's how a lot of youth try to stay involved.
Yeah, I completely agree with Michael. He's definitely been one of the leaders, at least at Longwood, within for college Republicans. And as he said, there's not really youth wings you can affiliate, or you can be, you know, college Democrats, college Republicans, and a lot of times people tend to focus more on ideas. As he mentioned, it's a lot more about, and then your ideas align with a specific party, not you align with a specific party. That's a lot of times how it works. But he covered it pretty good.
Okay. One of the things I see with this is the popularity of many of these grassroots movements and of these non-party actors influencing in the American elections, from, I don't know, evangelicals to in one end to a spectrum to Black Lives Matter. One that has always called me their attention, because actually they are also present to some extent in Europe, is PragerU, to which, I mean, Ventura participated and is a member of and participated. So could you, from the perspective of a foreigner in the US, could you explain us a bit more, Ventura, what do they do, these sorts of organizations, and particularly what did you do and how do you view that?
For example, me being a foreigner, Beltran being a foreigner, living in Spain, living in Europe, at the end, living outside the United States, it's very easy to get inside the American politics. Like Beltran told before, I belong to Prager Force. Prager Force is the students group of PragerU. And it's one of the most easiest ways in which you can get involved. The only thing that you need to do is like share videos from PragerU, share new content in Instagram, in Twitter, in Facebook, in any of these spaces. For example, also you can belong to certain groups, and for example, you can make articles, even participate in new videos that PragerU premiere every week. So this kind of things is very easy to get involved with. If you're interested in belonging to Prager Force, in this PragerU student group, it's very easy. The only thing that you need to do is going to their website, prageru.com/PragerForce, I think is a website, and there you can sign up, and in a few days you will be inside, and it's very cool. Thanks to them, I got invited this past January to Los Angeles, and with a few more international students, and I lived there a great experience. And also I learned a lot about the American conservatism. And also, as like Michael or Kevin said before, being like living here in Spain, you can also participate in many of these grassroots movements, like for example, Turning Point USA, Young Americans for Freedom. They develop certain events along the year. Like for example, Turning Point USA is maybe the most known. For example, they make during the year several events. The two of them that are more important, let's say, are the 10 Student Action Summit that is developed in January or July, and later in winter, in December, they also do another event in Florida, that is the Student Action Summit. These past few years, even Donald Trump went there, and he did great speeches. Also, I saw Donald Trump in person in one of these events, and it's very cool. You know a lot of people there, and you start to know more about what American people think and what is about the American politics. So these are very good ways to get involved in American politics, being a foreigner like us.
Well, the thing I see there is, first of all, that facility, and it's great. You know, all these technologies and the possibility to be involved in politics, being a whole Atlantic across, a whole ocean across. However, it also reminds me of how different our political systems tend to be. And I would like to ask to the three of you, not only from the system, because at the end of the day, you Americans, when you created the presidency and the constitution, you tried to create some sort of democratic king. That's why your system is a presidential, as you need. It was a world full of kings and emperors, so you needed your own king. Whereas as Europeans, democracy came, we have that parliamentarian democracy, as our whole aim was to limit the powers of the kings we already have. I don't know if that has provoked us to be more left-wing, and you more to the right. So, but certainly we do have in our system, so our healthcare and our healthcare system is far more developed than yours, and a lot more of the intervention of the state in society. I would like to know if you from the USA, and then you can on Ventura too, do you view as Europeans as too left-wing? Go for it, just don't restrain yourself. Fire all you got.
No
Kevin, you wanna
bias.
go first?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, doesn't matter. I don't think Europeans are too left wing. But I do think that the center is more left than it is here. So, you guys, obviously healthcare is a huge debate in our country, but it's just accepted there, and that might not be, we obviously have other more social programs and things like that have evolved over our history. So it's not that we're without those. It's just that the points are a little bit different. And I know that for Europeans, I think that, it's a little bit more like the center is just a little bit more left in general. But I don't think you guys are too left wing. I actually don't think that, a lot of what you guys do is all that different from the discussions that we have in this country. We're just a little bit more enshrined in the Constitution, and since it takes maybe a little bit longer to have larger changes, and we have those discussions, and that's why the Constitution exists, so it doesn't ebb and flow society too much. But I don't think you guys are too left wing. I'm not
Okay.
I definitely don't think anything too bad of you.
Fine.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think that, I know a lot of Europeans that are pretty conservative too, like with American standards as well. I think a lot of times European governments go maybe a little bit too far left, compared to.
I mean, currently our government is going too far to the left, but please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's with the United States. When we were founded, we were being controlled by a large European power, Britain, and they had a lot of control on our people. So when the United States was created in our Constitution, they wanted to make sure that the government's power was limited, that the ruling people, like the president, they had limited powers as well, and that the people were free. So when any issue that comes about, like healthcare, people start to question, like, is this a role that the government should play in our lives? Should the government have a say in our healthcare? So like in the United States before, we had a lot of private healthcare, and there's a lot of competition between the healthcare companies to have low prices, because if you have lower prices, then more people are going to have your healthcare. But since Obama came on to try to create his own healthcare, universal healthcare in the style of the Europeans, a lot of drug prices and healthcare prices have started to rise because there is not as much competition between private companies. So I don't think that a lot of European governments are too far left, but sometimes it does scare me, the amount of control that I can see some governments enforcing on their people.
We are very Constitution centric here, as Michael said, just because of they were so focused on that coming out of the war with Britain, and having, like, if you look through the Bill of Rights, essentially everything that happened 50 years prior to the Revolutionary War, these were infractions. So they were very worried about that, and we are very Constitution centric. You don't really just throw out amending the Constitution. You're not supposed to. It's becoming a little more popular now to just throw out that we need all these amendments and to completely change the system. But yeah, we're very Constitution centric, and we are very much into individual rights. And when you hear, as horrible as it might be, completely denounce any kind of far right wing like Nazis, they don't allow that in Germany, and we as Republicans and in general completely denounce that here. But we still want those ideas to be expressed, because we believe suppression of any kind of idea is only going to lead to actual problems, even if it's an idea that we should all condemn. So that's why we're that's why we kind of get a little, iffy about any kind of control, because just the individual rights that we want. And thank you to Spain for helping us get rid of Britain there all those years ago.
You're welcome.
Well, it was a pleasure. Leaving the historical debate aside, because I'm too much of a history freak, and this is not to remark the role of Spain in the American Revolution, which we could touch another day. One of the things that particularly Michael showed with his reply is the fact of the power of the presidency. So, Obama and his project of Obamacare radically was a radical effect, had a radical effect in American politics. So again, these elections not us, but you are determining who will be the president. However, other positions, if I'm not wrong, are being also contested. Could you please let us know what else are you voting today?
So as far as policy goes, there are a lot of recent changes that have come about in the last couple of weeks, such as our Supreme Court. We are supposed to have 9 justices, and these justices are supposed to be impartial. However, we do have conservative or liberal judges, and that just means how they interpret our Constitution. So conservative judges try to say exactly what the Constitution says, where liberal judges tend to interpret the Constitution and what it could mean. So Trump just appointed a new conservative judge to replace a old liberal judge. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have tried to, they're trying to say that they want to pack the Supreme Court, maybe add more justices to make the Supreme Court more liberal. And I think that's an issue that has arisen on this new campaign. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to increase taxes on not only the wealthy, but also the middle upper class. I can see a lot of maybe a decrease in military spending, which would be a big problem for not only ourselves, but also many countries around the world that we protect. Just with the Democratic Party being elected, that means that our government size is expanding and they will have more control over the citizens. But I think Kevin knows more about some of the different types of elections that are also taking place on November 3rd.
Well, to go off Michael, he knows just as much as I do, so he's being modest. But for specific elections, there's obviously the presidential election. 1/3 of the U.S. Senate is being elected, and the entire House of Representatives. So, got a buddy back there, Michael. The senators have longer terms than the president. They have 6-year terms, but they're staggered. So every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. So, it's not a wholesale change of senators, and the entire House, which is there's many more. There's a 438 House of Representatives members. They are all up for election every 2 years. So on our ballot, it will literally be president. And it depends by state how many candidates are on there. Obviously, Trump and Joe Biden will be on there, but there are other parties that are on there. And then Virginia, we have 1 senator up for election. Some might have none. Georgia has a special election where they have both. That's very rare. And then you'll have your representative. And then for at least by state, a lot of times they'll do referendums, and you can vote on those specific issues.
Okay, one of the things, particularly linking back to Michael, that he mentioned is the importance and the skew of the battle for the Supreme Court. Last elections, not last elections, but the 2000 elections were defined by the fact that it was the Supreme Court, the one that said, that ultimately determined the winner, as it's prevented the Florida the state of Florida to have to recount, etc., etc., etc. This election, an issue that you may face is that of postal fraud with the postal voting. Again, due to the COVID-19 situation, many people have voted well, through mail, which is something that in Europe we do, or at least in Spain we do more than in the US. And particularly through the Trump campaign, they have pointed out the dangers of fraud coming from this. Do you think that's a real possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been so many news stories that have come out that a lot of the liberal media have not covered. But a lot of votes for this election cycle have already been found. Some were dumped in rivers, some were just thrown away completely. And a lot of people, when you vote, you can check your status online to see if your vote has been counted. And a lot of people are realizing that their vote has not been counted. And they're wondering, like, what is going on here? If there's corruption going on in the government, they don't know. And with more mail-in voting, it leaves the door open for foreign countries like Iran, Russia, or China. They have a lot of interest in who wins our election because that determines how their countries will be treated for the next 4 years. So it opens the door for them to try to influence our election. But a lot of people are scared that their votes are not going to count because a lot of times you can vote, and if one thing is wrong with your ballot, if maybe like one piece of information is missing, then your vote won't count and you can't get a retry if the election has already passed. So yeah, I think it's a major problem that we should have figured out a long time ago, but the reality is maybe we weren't there yet, but I'm worried about this election to see what will happen.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue in my opinion, but I think that just like election problems as a whole is something that's grown in recent years. As Michael mentioned, there's been foreign interference. Social media has opened that up for that in general, to whatever degree. It's pretty much happened. And the postal ballots is probably an issue where, as I said, we're very worried about rights and the Constitution. Well, voter suppression has been an issue in this country in the past, and so people see showing valid IDs as voter suppression, and we're very worried about enfranchisement. So many people in our past have been disenfranchised, so we're very conscious about making sure that everyone gets a vote, but that also opens up a gap for fraud. And I think that there's definitely been voter fraud probably for the last, to a certain extent for the last 15 years. I think that it's going to be prevalent this time because of how polarized our country is. And as Michael said, that's something that to have legitimate elections, that's something that I think as a country need to kind of tackle to make sure that we're having the free and fair elections.
Well, when we were preparing this interview, I remember, we mentioned the possibility that results may not come straight away, and that they may be contested to a decision. And you said, God no, because this time there will be violence. And we have seen the rise of many groups that that are expressing their concerns or are protesting in the most peaceful of ways. I'm particularly thinking in the Black Lives Matter movement, which has become quite prevalent, at least, well, obviously in the US, but also in Europe. We have focused a lot on them. One of the things that caught my attention is obviously the problem of racism is one that has to be dealt severely and has to be fixed. However, everything in life depends how you express your discontent with the situation. One thing that you cannot tolerate is the use of violence. And that's the reason why, from American opinion polls, since Black Lives Matter started, the popularity was massive. However, the more violence, the more protests they have been responsible for, this popularity has declined sharply. So my question to you, Michael, is what's your opinion of said movement and that danger of protest?
So I, of course, have no problem with saying Black Lives Matter. And I don't think there are many people in the United States that would have a problem with saying Black Lives Matter. However, there is an organization called Black Lives Matter that has been behind a lot of violence. And a lot of people, when you say, like, I do not support Black Lives Matter, they're talking about the organization, not the phrase Black Lives Matter, because of course Black Lives Matter. But this organization has supported a lot of socialist candidates. They've supported a lot of rioting and violence and the destruction of cities across the United States for random situations. And I think it's completely inappropriate. It's completely wrong. I think it's wrong that a lot of the Democrats have not spoken up more to denounce the violence that has gone on. So I think there are a lot of problems in the United States with maybe social justice. I think there's a lot of problems like around the world with this issue, and we're not alone in that fight. However, we can't be supporting organizations that are only going to make problems worse. So I think where the support for the organization Black Lives Matter has dramatically gone down, I think the call for more equality has gone up.
What I see to some extent is the I don't know if it's a reputation problem or a propaganda problem, as the sense that the Republicans, despite being Lincoln's party and despite being one of the party that actually tends to improve the most the lives of minorities in the United States, is always tilted with that racism allegation constantly. It's always used as a weapon against them, something that we sadly see in Spain, as in anything the right wing does is automatically linked with the previous dictator we have in our country. So we do see parallels. So Kevin, what I would like to point to you is, to somebody that sees or that attacks or considers the Republican Party as racist, what will you say?
Yeah, I would just say that me and Mike have both been called racists. It happens. If you're conservative, it just happens. And I think that, there's certainly, people who do support the Republican Party who are far right wing and racist, I'm sure. But I don't think that the Republican Party is inherently racist. As you said, it is the party of Lincoln. And I would just, when that happens, some people are very sure of themselves and don't really want to listen to dialogue. So I kind of just, if that happens, I try to have dialogues and rapport with people about, growing up the way they did or the way I did and why we have our certain views. And I think that when that happens, when you slap labels on groups, whomever it is, that becomes an issue and it becomes an open door for assumptions. So when that happens, Mike might have a different answer, but I just try to have a dialogue with the people who are willing that, want to talk about that. And once, you can establish I don't hate minorities. I don't hate people of color. Actually, I just see our country a little differently and I see solutions differently. Once you can establish that dialogue, it definitely helps. I think that it's very easy for those in power or perhaps media outlets to slap Republicans as racist, and they take maybe sound bites or issues, and that makes it easier. So I try to say, point out, the histories, the policy, and individuals as well as, of Republicans being accepting.
With this, I always say that, and it's something really peculiar. In Europe, if you read the news, you can never imagine, so you will have never imagined that Bush was going to win, and you will have never imagined that Trump was going to win because of the overwhelming negative coverage there is. Again, partly because of this bias or this sort of propaganda, these attacks, these slanders against one of the two parties in this duopoly. So I'd like to bring Ventura into the discussion and ask him, how do you think that from the European perspective, the media covers the American elections or the American political life in general?
What I am seeing since the 2016 elections is that the media has always bias against the Republicans. They are always pro-Democrats candidates. So they are always trying to speak very well about all the Democrats candidates and always talking very bad things about the Republican ones. For example, I don't know, for example, with the Supreme Court confirmation of Amy Cornett Barrett a few weeks ago, almost all the coverage that the Spanish media or the European media gave about this confirmation was that Amy Corey Barrett was an extremist. She was extremist. She was a very devout Catholic, and they were saying that being a very devout Catholic, it was a bad thing. What I'm trying to say is that they are always like saying that the people that come from the Republican Party or people that are conservatives are always bad people. There's also another thing that I wanted to say. A few days ago, I was watching the TV. Here in Spain, we have two national well, we have more public channels, television channels. One of them is called La Dos, the second channel, let's say, and they premiere, let's say, a documental about how was going the United States 2020 elections. And what I'm saying is that, for example, in this documental, I don't know exactly which is the name in English, almost all the coverage that they gave for the American elections were completely bad. Well, for example, first in the news, from, I don't know, maybe for the 3 news that they gave about the American elections, 2 of them are from the Democrat candidates, and the 2 of them are very good news. And the other one, they leave the space for Donald Trump. And what they always say is that Donald Trump is a very bad president, that he's very racist, that he's very misogyny, I think is a word. What I'm trying to say is that they always say that Donald Trump is very bad. And this is very hard to see because they are telling these things in public media, in media that are being funded by citizens' money, by the taxes. So it's very sad to see this. Also because, for example, here in Spain, there are a lot of old people, and many of the information that they receive about the American politics, about the American elections, are always biased. Like I said, it's always about how bad the American presidents coming from the Republican Party are and have been, and how good the Democrats has been for America and for the entire world. So I think this topic very interesting, because I see that here in Europe, here in Spain, the media is very biased, and they are always trying to paint some candidates as the worst ones and the other ones as the better ones. It's very hard for me to explain, but it's what I think.
One of the effects I think this has is particularly in the younger generations, due to the fact that perhaps we're more exposed to media and to social networks. And if you see in Spain, we do have a big issue in the sense that young people are the ones that vote the least, and when they vote, they tend to go to the streams. So in Spain, young people will vote, if they are left-wing, they will vote overwhelmingly for Podemos, which is the far left, non-traditional left-wing party, whereas if they're right-wing, they will vote for Vox, which is the equivalent in the right. In the US, I also know that young people tend to vote the least, and equally, they tend to vote more Democrat than Republican. So we're entering into the last part of our discussion, but how do you think, you being 2 young Republicans, how do you think you can fix this and revert this trend?
I think a lot of what we're doing already, we just need to increase that. So a lot of the organizations like Turning Point USA and Young Americans for Freedom have been trying to energize the younger population into going out and voting. I think there's a lot of similarities between American politics and Spanish and European politics. I know that a lot of young people in both of our countries want the government to provide more benefits for them. When I don't think that's the role of the government to provide a lot of benefits for people. The role of the government is to protect the citizens. So when you start promising things like free college and free healthcare, a lot of young people are happy because they think like, oh, like that's something that I would have had to pay for in the past, but now I will not have to, when that's completely not true. You're going to be paying for that in taxes for the rest of your life. And the government's budgeting deficit will increase. So I think for increasing young people to vote for more conservative candidates, I think we need to be better and more proactive about providing information on what we're about to the young people.
Okay. Well, I need to see if you are successful on that over there in the States and see how we can apply it in Europe, because again, it's a big issue, and it's a shame that we, the young people, the ones that are gonna inherit the world to some extent, the ones that, this one sounds terrible, but I will say it. If somebody who is 90 years old decided to vote for something really, really radical and short term, okay, he's on his right to do it, but it will affect that person for a brief period of time. Whereas somebody who is young like us, that decision taken is going to affect us for 50, 60, even 70 years. So perhaps we should be, not perhaps, definitely we should acknowledge more the importance of voting and the fact that the society, it's the one we want it to be, and we need, and the one we're going to live in. So we have to participate more. We are, as I said, entering to the last part. So I'm going to leave asking you 3 questions, slightly complicated. So it's going to be fun. I mean, just please do be honest. We mentioned that one of the things is the big personalities. I presume you've been, I don't want to presume, but I assume that you are going to vote for a certain president whose name starts with T, this election. However, Kevin, I would like to ask you, what do you think is Trump's worst characteristic, and what do you think is Biden's best aspect?
That's a great question.
I'm sorry, by the way, I know it's extremely mean, but don't worry, I will also be mean with Michael.
Okay, no, that's why we're here, to answer tough questions. I think we'll start with Biden. I think when it comes to him, he has a lot of experience, and he comes across as very stable. And I think especially just with the climate of where we are as a country right now, that is certainly appealing to many people. And I think that I think that everybody's got their pros and cons, but he comes across as very stable, and I think he kind of comes across as like an old, grandfather figure who will help mentor the country through this. And I gotta be honest, it's a very good play is politically. I mean, he does a great job of kind of staying quiet. Conversely, I think Trump's, one of his problems is that he talks a little too much. I think that if he were to lay back on his policies and, what he could do and kind of be the businessman that, he has been his whole life, I think he gives ammo, as we talked about earlier. Sometimes it's not easy to defend him when they just have all these sound bites and such of what he says, and it could be taken out of context or whatnot. So I wish that he would let his record speak a little bit more for himself. I think he can kind of get himself in binds sometimes. But yeah, that's probably what I'd say for both. It's a good question.
Well, as I promised, I also need to be mean with Michael now in return. I do follow American politics in general. Obviously this year there hasn't been a lot of alternative candidates to Trump. I know a former governor of yours attempt to do so, but with little success. However, the Democratic platform was, they had to have 2 debates due to the sheer size of all of them who had. There were a couple of them I quite like. Actually, I was really fond of Tulsi Gabbard, and honestly, and of Pete Buttigieg also. I think he brought a nice image, but this is not my interview, it's yours, so sorry for that. If we take Trump and Biden out of the question, and I was to ask you, Michael, to choose a president, a Republican and a Democratic president, who will you go for? Again, I know there are tons of Democrats, and perhaps you cannot think of so many Republicans, but who will you go for?
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of so many Republicans. There's a few Democrats I have in mind. I would also, for Democrat, I'll start with Democrats. I would also choose Tulsi Gabbard and maybe she's somebody that a lot of people internationally have not heard. She's a senator from Hawaii, and she is in the United States Army Reserves and is an officer. And she's fairly conservative for the Democrat Party. And what I like about her is that she would fight for the military and make sure that the military is being taken care of. And that's very important to me. I live in the United States. I live in a very large military area. I live about like 10 miles from the largest naval base in the entire world. So the military has always been very important to me. So that's why I would choose Tulsi Gabbard. For the Republican Party, that's a very hard choice. I think I would choose, her name is Nikki Haley, and possibly a lot of people internationally have her name because she was our United Nations ambassador for the first 3 years of Trump's presidency. She is formerly the governor of South Carolina, and I think she's a woman that a lot of conservatives are talking about being the successor of Trump after Trump is leaving office, whether that's on November 3rd or it's in 4 years. A lot of people are wanting Nikki Haley to run for president. So I'm really excited to see what both of them do in the future.
Well, guys, I think that's a pretty good question also. Well, it's time to close this. And before thanking you and thanking the audience, which is the most important part of this channel, I want to ask you the last question. Try to be brief or not, I mean, doesn't matter, but try to answer from the heart. Honestly, who do you think will win today? Trump or Biden?
Do you want to go first?
Sure.
The three of them, the three of you are going to reply. So, I mean, do it.
Gotcha. That's a very hard question. I honestly have no idea. In 2016, I thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. There were minor signals that Trump was going to win, but I did not think that he could. In 2020, even though Joe Biden has better chances with polling, I don't believe the polls. I think that Trump will win today. I think that there's a lot of people that support Trump, but will not admit that they support him because they don't want to be harassed. They don't want to be yelled at. They don't want to lose friends because of who they support for president. And unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of people. So if Trump wins today, I'll be very happy.
Okay. Kevin, go for it.
It's a great question. Kind of on what Mike said. I'm honestly not entirely sure. Taking from 2016, all the polls were against Trump, and he won. And it's looking similar now. But there are some key differences between then and now. Is that Biden is not under investigation from the FBI, as Hillary Clinton was, and he's a little bit less problematic. And I think that one thing the Democrats have done very well is get people out to vote. There's I think a lot of people didn't vote in 2016. They just assumed Hillary would win. And they've painted this picture that you have to go vote, go do this. It's on all our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, even Snapchat is talking about where you can find your candidates vote. That's unprecedented. And we've had record numbers of voting early. So I think that if Trump wins, I don't think he'll win the popular vote again. I think that Biden would probably win the popular vote, but some of those states are toss-ups. I don't know. I'm honestly not sure. I'll just go against Mike and say, just to make it interesting for Ventura, I'll say that I think Biden will probably win, and Republicans will kind of have to pivot off of that. So I'll say that. So I'll put the pressure on Ventura to break the tie. Okay.
That way one of you is going to answer correctly at least. But finally, the person that made this interview possible, and to I owe a large amount of gratitude, is you, Ventura. What's your opinion?
I don't know. A lot of people is asking me about who is going to win. I don't know why are they asking me this, but what I am always saying is that I want Trump to win, but I think also that he is going to win. Maybe he is going to win just for a few more votes or because of the electoral college, like in 2016. I think he's going to win. But both candidates have a lot of weight in their backs. Like, for example, I think it was Kevin that was saying that, for example, Hillary Clinton have this FBI investigation in these past elections. Right now, for example, Biden have his son, Hunter, and a lot of people is talking a lot about Hunter Biden and about all the dirty businesses that he has done. And that's something that I think is affecting like the image of Biden. And also Trump have in his back the all the coronavirus situation, how he's managing all of it. And I think that a lot of people are thinking who to vote based on these two things. I think it's very important, these two swing states, Florida and Pennsylvania. I think the decision is going to be made in these two key states, in these two swing states. And like I said, I think Trump is going to win. Like, I don't trust the polls, but a few days ago, the polls show that Trump was maybe 45 and Biden was like 55, I think. Now the polls are getting closer. So I don't know. I repeat, I don't trust very much in the polls, but now that the polls are getting so close for both candidates, like the results are getting so closer, I think that Trump has a lot of chances to win, but we won't know who will win until November 3rd or November 4th. That I think will be the day that the result will come out. So that's my opinion.
We'll have to
Well,
see.
we will see. To you guys, I mean, I'm not going to reply who I think will win because you answered that. I'm neither going to say who I want to win because I think everyone will be really surprised if I say who I want to. And I like being mysterious, so I will not say it. But guys, this has been an excellent interview. I'm super grateful for having had two actors, two participants of the American political life in El Rincón de Beltrán. I wish you the best of luck, and I really hope that whatever you predicted comes out to be true. Ventura, again, a million thanks for doing this. I wish you also the best of luck in Prager Force. I think that doesn't matter if you are right wing, you are left wing, you are an environmentalist, a feminist, whatever you are. I think that the most important thing for us young people is to participate and to fight for what we believe, not only because it's trending in social media or because it's comfortable, but because we really love it and we really fight. So I wish you the best of luck for that. And now, going back to Spanish, muchísimas gracias a toda la audiencia. Espero que os haya gustado esta segunda edición, este especial americano. Perdón por las diferencias lingüísticas, bueno, aunque los subtítulos espero que lo hayan resuelto. Nos volveremos a ver en 2 semanas. Esta vez el Ministro de Defensa no me va a cancelar nada, así que tendré un invitado para vosotros dentro de 15 días. Creo que os va a gustar muchísimo. Gracias por acompañarme otra vez más. Y cualquier sugerencia que tengáis, podéis mandármela, por favor. Bueno, ya sabéis lo que dicen todos los youtubers. Suscribíos, daros like, comentar. Pero bueno, lo importante es que hayáis aprendido algo. Muchísimas gracias a vosotros.